Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the show. And today I'm going to be talking about something that's maybe not that positive, but something that I think people need to be aware of. And that is the issue of anti-Muslim hatred here in the UK. I'm an optimist, somebody who tries to focus on things that are positive and not always focusing on negative. And I sometimes come across, I think, too many Muslims that actually focus always on negative. But sometimes we have to accept realities are often sometimes can be negative as well. And so we do have a situation in the UK now where Muslims are considered to be a problem. Islam and everything to do with Islam and Muslims is seen to be negative and causing problems in this country, and it's something that I think we need to be aware of, but also be looking for solutions of how we can deal with it. So just really to talk about some of the background, we have up to about 3 million Muslims in Britain of a population of about 60 to 62 million. And Muslims have been here for hundreds of years, but actually the majority of Muslims came here in the 60s, mainly from Pakistan and some other countries. And we now have a situation where, you know, the population of Muslims here is quite diverse. So in a city like London, you'd have Muslims from, I think, probably every possible background you can think of people who are Muslim and living in Britain. And I think ever since September the 11th and the attacks that happened in America, and then since then we had our own attacks in London, and then there have been other things happening around the world, I think the spotlight and the focus on Muslims around the world and for us here in Britain has been greater. It's much greater than it's ever been before. And you know, there's a real spotlight and a focus on Muslims to answer for really the other things that are happening around the world or even here. We have a situation where mosques are, masajids are attacked, where if there's a new masjid needs to be built in an area, then people in that area will oppose it, and the planning will not be given permission, and the masjid won't be built. This is happening. I mean, these are real things that are happening, and we need to be aware of them. Women are a target because if they wear a scarf, then they are quite obviously Muslim, and so become more of a target. The word Islamophobia is a word that is used a lot now in Britain and is not new. It was a word that was adopted and confirmed as being real back as far as about 1997, when an organisation called the Runnymede Trust actually ran a report and did some work and some research on anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic sentiments in Britain. And they confirmed in that report that, yes, there were people who were anti-Islam and Muslims, and often for no real reason. Some Muslims and others and academics don't like the word Islamophobia because feel that it doesn't really give a good impression of what we're really talking about, but nevertheless it's there. And really, why is it happening? I mean, this is a complex question, and believe me, over the last, especially 10 years or so in this country, there have been numerous conferences, debates, papers, books, articles, discussions about this, what the relationship should be with Muslims in Britain, how Muslims are seen, how the understanding of Islam is, how it is, and should it be better. And these are discussions that are happening, have happened, and are happening, and I think will keep on happening here in Britain. And I think we can always see it as negative, and we can always feel that this is unfair, and we can feel the victims, and we can feel that we are somehow being unfairly treated and too much spotlight put on us, and that could make us retreat and sort of back into a corner and not be positive and not contributing. And I think that isn't the way to approach this topic. And I think even though we have so much spotlight and so much discussion on Islam and Muslims in Britain, we need to see it overwhelmingly as a positive, and how can we develop better relationships, how can we share our faith more with people who are now much more interested in Islam than they've ever been before. I think one of the other issues is there's a general fear, there's a general ignorance, there's a general misunderstanding from people about Islam. There are clearly well-funded, well-organised groups, not so much here, although there are people here, but certainly in America there are well-funded groups of people who are working on this anti-Muslim hatred on a daily basis, whether it be through articles, through blogs, through advertisements, through radio stations, through TV. This is their job, to spread anti-Muslim hatred in America and then feed that into other places. And clearly there has been some recent research done in Britain to show direct links between some of these people in America and links that they have to people here. So I think as Muslims we're aware of this, we need to be even more aware of it. It's a reality, it's an ugly reality, but it's something that is there. I think in terms of statistics, we only in the last year have really been starting to try and gather properly some of the data around attacks on Muslims and anti-Muslim sentiment, whether it be in real or online. And certainly one of the worrying trends is that a lot of the anti-Muslim sentiments and hatred is actually coming out online. And the problem with online, on the internet and on Facebook and Twitter and other social media, is very, very difficult to actually legislate at the moment against that. It's seen as we have a freedom, people have freedom to talk about whatever they want pretty much. And so at the moment there's some discussions and work being done with the legislators in this country to say, look, this kind of hatred is spreading and is allowed to be spreading online and nobody's doing anything about it, nobody's being arrested, and you know that is a piece of work that is being done. And last year a new project was set up specifically to address and actually to monitor these issues. So one of the criticisms, I suppose, has been generally is that we know that anecdotally we know these stories, we know people that have suffered at the hands of attacks, whether they be verbal attacks, physical attacks, ongoing prejudice at school, in university, in the workplace, in the home, in their communities. That's just anecdotal stories. We've not known how to capture what's really happening and then do something to address those issues. And we all know that having data and research is always a very valuable way of proving and showing what's really happening. So in the last 1 year, through that service that was set up last year, there have been more than 600 incidents that have been reported to that helpline and to that organisation. Now I know, and we all know, that actually that 600 would be a lot higher. But in terms of actually being reported, it's more than 600 incidents, whether they be verbal attacks, attacks online, and a lot of the abuse that's been happening has been happening online. More women than men, so again women who wear a scarf are visually Muslim, and so that creates a situation where they become vulnerable to attacks, verbal attacks, physical attacks, abuse in general, because they are obviously Muslim. I think the fact that we are now able to measure and to show what is really happening will go a long way. I think it will help to then put things in place that need to be there to make sure that these things are recognised and acknowledged. At the moment, I think a lot of our the people around us may not necessarily understand how bad it is. You know, masajid being damaged, people being physically attacked, abused. This is unacceptable for any community. The Jewish community here have been monitoring and reporting on attacks against them for many years now, and have become very good at monitoring. And some of the learning that we have done needs to come from that community and others who are able to share what's really happening, and that's work that needs to happen. So I think we need to be mindful of it. We need to be aware of it. We obviously see in some of our newspapers, for example, here in Britain, we have you could say a free press, So freedom of speech is a constant debate that happens in Britain around where are the limits. Are you allowed to say whatever you want about anybody, or should there be natural limits? What are those limits? What's the line? You know, where is it when someone crosses the line when they say something? If we are, as Muslims, if we are supporting or wanting to support our scholars or speakers to come in and speak in Britain, and they maybe have a reputation or background for saying things that are not positive or which are considered to be sort of hate speech, then we have to be willing to speak out against those people as well, and not just to talk about others and to say that it's unfair on Muslims. As Muslims, we need to be balanced and actually even-handed in talking about if there's hate speech coming from one group to another, we need to be there to speak out against that as well. Now, of course, it's not all bad, and as an optimist, I find it very difficult to talk about the bad without then trying to somehow balance it out with the good and what is happening and things that are good in this issue in this country. I think we have more freedom to practice our faith here as Muslims than many other countries in the world. I've never lived anywhere else, and I would never want to live anywhere else, and I feel, you know, happy and content living here as a Muslim, as a woman, as a mother, and as somebody who really feels that, you know, this really is one of the best countries in the world. And we have more freedom, I would say, to practice our faith here than maybe even in some of the Muslim countries. And some of the stories that I hear coming from there, and then again coming from places in Europe, and how Muslims are treated, and some of the things that are happening, I feel actually very grateful that I am here. We have conferences and lectures and retreats and arts and music and food. And in fact, food is an interesting one in this country, and people always say that food can really be good to unite people. And the number one dish now in this country on every poll that you look at is actually curry. And of course, curry is not a Muslim dish, but clearly came from Pakistan and sort of Asia and the Muslim world largely. A lot of the restaurants, the sort of takeaways here all over the country are owned by and run by people who are from a Muslim background, and this is always joked about, but it's seen as actually a very positive aspect of multiculturalism and diversity that we are really happy and celebrate in this country. We have journalists who are good. We have some journalists that are very bad, but we have to acknowledge that there are journalists who are good, and I think as Muslims we need to get much better at even being part of the journalism and become journalists and writers and learn how to write and to express ourselves in a way that's positive, and really be part of the solution as well as addressing the problems. I had an email literally last night in my inbox from a student who's studying in one of the universities in Britain and is doing research on Islamophobia and the issues around it. You know, often we get emails and messages from people who are asking, can you be part of our study into this? Can you be part of our research? So I think we need to sort of look at the good, highlight the bad, and focus on what we can do to improve things. Sometimes Muslims are, I think, a bit too quick to focus only on the negative, and that's never been my approach. And I think we need to turn negatives into opportunities and positives wherever we possibly can. We mustn't be the victims. We still need to be the ambassadors of our faith, you know, and if our faith is under attack, whether it be online, whether it be in newspapers or on TV, then we still need to be the ambassadors. We need to look at the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, 1400 years ago, and he faced a lot more negative attacks and verbal attacks and physical attacks than we will probably ever in our life. And I think, how did he manage? How did he turn those very negative situations into something that actually became very, very positive? And often his response to people and the way he dealt with a very negative situation was sometimes enough to literally turn that person around. Whether they became Muslim or not, it doesn't matter, but about how he dealt with them, his character, how he kept himself calm and patient and still dealt with people with love and respect, even when they were the most horrific people to him. He was still able to do that. So for us as Muslims living now, we need to remind ourselves of that and remember, how can we deal with these issues that are difficult, but what's the best way for us to do that? We still need to be the best of people. So, you know, sometimes if we're provoked, that can be the worst time for us to actually be, you know, honest and just and respectful of others. But we have to really, really try. And those are the times when our faith is under attack and we feel that we need to defend it, but the way that we defend it is also really, really important. You know, I'm an activist, and I'm part of, you know, lots of different projects and lots of different work that goes on. And for me, the fact that there's such a negative spotlight on Islam and Muslims actually gives me more of an opportunity to talk about my faith, and not in a way which I think sometimes Muslims feel they should, which is to give someone a leaflet and say, come and learn about my religion and come back when you're a Muslim. That's not, for me, the way. It was never the way of the Prophet. He, yes, directly did things and invited people to his faith. A lot of it was about his character, the way he did things, the way he worked, the way he was in society. And I feel even if there are only 2 million or 3 million, or even if there were 10 million Muslims in this country, if we were to be able to give a positive impression, if we were to be the best of people in the way that we're taught we should be, then really any negative and any imbalance in their understanding of Islam would be quashed, because people would have nothing apart from good to say about us. You know, if we became the people who were known for feeding the homeless, if we became the people who were known for helping the poor, if we became the people who are known for helping the needy, that would be amazing. And I think that requires effort and time and proper work on our part to really do these kinds of things to redress that balance. Of course Muslims are contributing, of course Muslims are generous, of course Muslims are giving in charity and helping others, and that's part of our faith, and rightly so. I don't think it's enough, and I don't think we're showing it enough. I don't think our PR is not good enough. We need much more, public relations needs to be a lot better. And some of the kind of work that I'm involved with, which I think does start to redress some of these things, and rather than us just talk about the negative and how bad Islam is seen and how bad Muslims are seen, we try and say, look, let's try and see if we can do something about that. And this year we had the 20th anniversary of Islam Awareness Week. Now, Islam Awareness Week was a project that I was involved with, and people have been involved with for about the last 20 years, and which is amazing. All volunteers, people who do this work alongside their own jobs, but really do it because it's about focusing on 1 week of the year, where we need to be doing this work all year round, but on 1 week of the year we really have a focus on bringing people together, building bridges, creating dialogue, explaining our faith to them, opening our mosques, doing work with people who aren't Muslim, working on joint projects together. 1 week of focus where we do so much of this kind of work. It's been, always has been, and once again this year, happened a few weeks ago, is such an inspiration to see Muslims who want to strive to do more, to represent their faith, to redress the balance, to help deal with some of the misconceptions. And this year our theme, we normally try and have a theme, and this year our theme was the things we have in common. And this was really about taking some of the quirky, nice, fun, lighter side of things, as well as the more serious issues, and say, look, here we brought pairs of people together. So we brought pairs of people, one who was Muslim and one who wasn't, and did interviews with them, we took photographs of them, we did articles with them, to really show that actually a lot of the time things that we have in common are much more than those things that we have that are different. And living in a minority context for Muslims, it's really important that we can share this to show that we're all just the same. Often a lot of what we have is the same as others, and this is one way that we can look at redressing this balance of misunderstanding of what Islam and Muslims are about. And when you start to show pairs of people, one who's Muslim and one who isn't, and something real that they have in common. We had a pair of people here, both of whom have had cancer, and have survived, and their story and their journey and how they did that. We have had, we shared, a pair shared their story, one who's Muslim and one who isn't, both who've been homeless, and what that meant to them, and how there were similarities but also differences in how they dealt with that. We had people who play football together. We had people who go cycling together who are both, one Muslim, one not. This was our way of demonstrating that we have more in common than not, and that if we always look to the negative and the sort of clash of faiths, or the clash of our way of life, then that is never going to be something that we can then develop into anything positive. And we also have to, as Muslims, work with some of the mainstream groups and organisations and charities who look at are actually dealing with the anti-Muslim hatred by speaking about it and by doing something more than I think sometimes Muslims do. This is an organisation that I've personally have been doing a lot of work with, called Hope Not Hate, and this is really an organisation of people who, of the good people of this country, people who are coming out and saying racism, or in our case, and nowadays the focus has been on anti-Muslim, so looking at Muslims and saying they're somehow the other and they're not part of our country. And these good people who come forward and say, no, you're wrong, that actually people who say that are absolutely the minority, and the majority of this country, people just want to get on, want to live in harmony, want to work together. I wrote an article here which was published in this magazine called Celebrating the Past, Organising for the Future. And this article was focusing on the Olympics. You can see there one of our national heroes who won 2 gold medals, Mo Farah, as a Muslim, at the Olympics last year. And somebody who's a real genuine role model and such an inspiration for so many people. I actually wrote this article to talk about how we look back at the Olympics and how amazing it was at bringing people together, but also to show what we're going to do going forward. What's our action? You know, I'm an activist, and so I'm always looking for what we can do together. And coming together with the good people of this country who can speak for us. And as Muslims, we talk about the negatives and how people are criticising us and how they're putting us into a corner and how there's somehow this clash. And the majority of the people in this country do not believe that. And we need to come together with those people and say, look, this is the kind of work we can do together. Let's do some joint work together. Let's deal with these people and talk about this and say that's not part of us, but also to do the positive work, the community building, the work that we can do together. Whatever that is, we need to be looking for those opportunities. And with the Olympics being in London last year, what that did was that showed that actually we're all part of this. And when you see people like Mo Farah and others, whether they be Muslim or not, the whole country came together behind them, whatever their background. And that was such an amazing, positive, I think, moment in our history in Britain, that everybody sort of came and focused on that, and we invited the world in to share that diversity and that positive with us. You know, and Muslims are there at every part of society, in every walk of life that you can think of. And sometimes people don't know that, and that needs to be celebrated. So I think in summary, I would say that yes, the statistics are there, the hate crimes are there, the masajids are being attacked, people are being criticised for purely just being Muslim, and sometimes it feels as if, and we know that those things are on the increase. But what we have to also know, we're not the only ones that have suffered in this way in Britain. Other communities have, certainly the Jewish community have, the Irish community have, you know, and we need to learn from them, to look at and say, look, we're not unique in that sense. And what's happening to us has happened before. We can get over this, and we can use this as a positive. So my sort of final message would always be that, look, don't focus on the negatives. Let's be optimistic. Let's use what is clearly happening as negative to look at how that can bring the good people together in this country, the majority of the people who are good, sideline the extremists wherever they come from, actually come together in the middle and be, you know, a positive force for good and for change in this country. And on that positive note, I will end and say Assalamu alaikum, and I will see you in the next episode.